Hey guys, and welcome to a new Photoshop tutorial. So recently I was contracted out to make an album cover. Unfortunately, mine was not chosen, but it was still fun to make, and I thought I would do a tutorial on how I created this look. I just thought it was super cool looking and fairly unique, so I wanted to just run through what I did. So I did a few first passes, and they just weren't very good. I kept trying to do this whole 3D thing, and it just really wasn't working very well for me. While it's cool looking, it just wasn't vibing with me. So I just wanted to kind of trash that and start from scratch, and I've ended up coming up with this pretty quickly on accident. So I wanted to go through how I created this look, and maybe it's something you can use in the future. So let's dive on in. So the first thing I'm going to do is just make a new composition. So I'm going to do Command N to make a new composition, and I want to make this pretty big. So I think it's about 2500 to 2500. We're not really printing CDs anymore very often, so I'm typically just going to live online, but this is pretty big at 300 DPI, so it shouldn't be too bad. So I'm going to click on that little custom template, and here we go. So I'm going to have a new document here. So I'm going to add just a dark color in the background. I'm going to use my shape tool and do something not quite black and not quite blue, but somewhere in the middle, super far down here. We can tweak this later on. So then I'm going to just drag my cursor and make that box. That's probably a little bit too black, but once we add some adjustment layers and some color correction, this will become more of a blue. So we'll come back to that in a bit. So the next thing I did is just sort of researched a few abstract images, and I came across a few that I thought were unique and that I could use. So the ones I found were this cool shot of Venus from raw pixel. So this is sort of a NASA image. So this was free to download, and it's public domain, so it's pretty cool. And so I downloaded that, and also downloaded this abstract shot here from Unsplash by Renee Bomer, just some cool light streaks. So threw those together and started messing around with what was possible. So let's jump on in. I'm gonna go ahead and drag that one in here, and let me get my other one as well. All right, so once I import those in, it's really just in transform mode. I can move it around, but I'm just going to hit enter to lock that into place. So the next thing I wanted to do was sort of pull out some of this information here. So I think I'm just going to duplicate that, Command J, just so I can save the original, and I'll just put that down here and turn it off for now so I can easily get back to it. And then I'm going to add a hue and saturation with my adjustments panel, so you can get all this up in the windows and adjustments. These are all kinds of color adjustments. So I'm going to click on this one, hue and saturation, and I'm going to drop that down to pretty much 0. And then I'm going to click on this button for a clipping mask, and that's going to make sure it's just affecting this layer right here. All right, so that looks pretty good. I might just adjust the levels just a little bit. So I'm going to click on levels, and again, make sure that's a clipping mask to that layer. So I'm just sort of building this tower of effects just for this layer here. So I'm going to click on levels and maybe pull this one in just to get some more detail. Something around there is probably good. And then I'm going to click on levels and click on the main image, highlight those. I'm kind of holding down shift while I click on those, and I'm going to hit Command E. That's just going to compress them all into one rasterized photo. So we'll just call this light streaks. All right, so now I want to try to pull out all these sort of white and gray lines away from this black and start affecting this image here. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to turn this one off, is I'm going to go make sure I have this layer selected. I'm going to go to select and go to color range, and then I can sort of just click once somewhere over here. That's going to get that really bright white spot right there. And then I sort of can adjust the fuzziness, or I can maybe hold down shift and click again. Whoop, that's maybe a little bit too much. Undo that. Maybe click in a few different spots. I'm sort of finding some middle of the line, gray and white. So that's too much. I'm undoing that. But I'm holding down shift to get that extra plus on the eyedropper tool and selecting some different colors. But that looks about right there. So, but if that's not quite working, you can maybe click on the black. So I'm going to not hold down shift and click on the black. And now I'm getting all of the black elements of the photo. So now I can click on invert. Kind of take a look at that. Looks about right. So let's go with that. That feels a little bit better. So I'm gonna hit OK, and now all of those layers are selected. So I should be able to click on this layer and then click on my layer mask here, and that's going to just it's going to sort of remove everything from that orange circle besides what is selected right now. So let's click on that, and now I can turn this one off, turn this one on. So now I have this cool looking circle with a bunch of lines on it. Okay, so I want to maybe move this around. I want to try to fill in this circle down here a little bit. So I'm going to click on this little chain link here, turn that off, and now I can move this clipping mask around just a little bit, or this layer mask around, to sort of try and get more of a full circle there. I could even duplicate this layer. So let me turn that back on there. I can hit Command J to duplicate it, and now I can rotate this entire layer to get sort of the opposite, and maybe move that around some to just get some different looks there. But I do kind of like how it's sort of deteriorating as it's rising up. So maybe I just need a few more. Maybe something kind of like that. Or I can maybe expand that some. I don't want to expand it too much because it is rasterized, so it might start falling apart as far as the pixels go, but we'll just go with something like that. And I'll hit enter to lock that in. And then I'm going to put both of these into a folder, Command G to a folder. And now I'm going to I want to just get that perfect circle selection here. So I'm going to go to my marquee tool and click on the elliptical tool. And then I'm going to click and drag a circle. I'm going to hold down shift so it's a perfect circle. I'm going to get somewhere in the ballpark of the size of this circle. That's pretty good. Now I can move this around just right. And I don't have to have it perfect on the edges there, but somewhere in this vicinity is about right. Okay, so now with that selected, I can do a layer mask on this folder and just have that selected. So I'm going to click on the layer mask button, and boom, now we have this cool circle. And now what's cool is that I have this group. I can go into that folder and maybe even adjust these clipping masks just a little bit, and I don't have to worry about that circle messing up. So let's go somewhere along there. That looks pretty good. Now I'm going to take this and scale it down just a little bit for now. Somewhere around here. I don't want to go too small just in case I need to bring it back up. My clipping mask will be vectorized, okay, or rasterized. All right, so then I think I added a sort of a big orange glow because I want to have all these streaks coming down here. So I'm going to take my brush tool, which is B. Actually, I need to make a new layer, so Shift Command N for a new layer, and we'll call this extra streaks. Okay, and then bump that brush up with my bracket tool, and I want to select somewhere in this orange, but not fully that color, so I can get somewhere close, and then maybe pick something kind of bright, maybe a little bit more orange here. Let's try that. Okay, I'm going to right click and make sure my hardness is all the way down, and then I'm going to sort of draw in. That feels a little bit too peachy. Let me undo that. Go back to these colors here, maybe pull some more reds in there, maybe more yellow. Okay, let's try this. I'm going to draw this in here like that. So next I think I can go into my folder and I can hold down Option and click on that clipping mask and drag it up to the extra streaks. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. So this is looking pretty cool. So now with that selected, I click on that clipping mask or layer mask and drag it down here somewhere. And I probably would even stretch it out some here. I think it would be okay to stretch out. I'm holding down Shift so that it sort of doesn't go fully proportionate. Just gonna stretch that out a pretty good bit. Something like that. It's looking pretty cool. Let's go even farther. All right, so somewhere around there. Okay, let's move all this up so we can see what we're doing. Hold down Shift, click those, and oops, my layer mask needs to be, the chain link needs to be clicked on. Slide that up. Okay, so now I'm going to throw this, let's see. Yeah, let's throw this into a group, Command G. So now I need to get rid of all this extra stuff out here. I don't want all that. So I'm going to I'm gonna hold down, I need all the information from this circle. So I'm gonna hold down a Command and click on that clipping mask. So now that's selected. And now I can sort of paint around that. I guess I could right click and do hit W on the keyboard with my selection tool, right click, and I'm going to hit select inverse. And now I'm going to sort of paint out all this stuff here on this clipping mask. I'm going to click on the clipping mask. I'm going to hit B on the keyboard for that brush tool, and you want to make sure that it is set to black so that anything erases, because clipping mask basically, or I guess I keep calling clipping mask, but layer mask, anything that is black is hidden, anything that is white is shown up. So I'm going to bump this brush size down, make sure that my extra streaks layer mask is selected, and start sort of painting this out here. Start with that. I'm going to bump my brush size down a pretty good bit. I can click and hold down shift and it'll go in a straight line. I can, with that feather on that brush, it sort of bleeds off like that. It looks a little bit like it's been shaded. I can even go a little bit bigger maybe. There we go, something like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. I have some down here at the bottom, so I'm gonna sort of just randomly brush these out. Maybe a smaller brush would be the best for that, and go, you know, kind of up and down. There we go. So it sort of looks like it's coming out of the darkness there a little bit. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm gonna hit Command D to deselect that. Now we're getting somewhere. So now let's start adding maybe just a little bit of texture and interest to this thing. So on the original, I did have a sort of a paper texture on that, so I'm going to drag that in. I'm not really sure where I got it from, but you can find, you know, tons of paper textures out there. So let's go ahead and get that in here. All right, so here is my texture. The first thing I'm going to do is really get rid of this brownish color. So I'm going to add a few adjustment layers to this by clicking on Adjustments. We'll go to Hue and Saturation, and I'm going to drop that all the way down to 0. Make sure that clipping mask button is selected. Then we'll add maybe levels, and then sort of make it just a bit more heavy on the contrast side, somewhere around here maybe. And we can always adjust this later. So there we go. So I'm going to click on levels, hold down shift, click on that paper layer, and group that so I can keep it all together. And we'll just call this paper texture. The next thing I want to do is do some blending modes on that paper to sort of let it blend with that background and those orange glows. So I'm going to click on the paper layer, hit V on the keyboard for my selection tool, and then I can do shift plus and minus and flip through the different blending modes which are happening all right here. And I never really know fully what these do exactly, what the math is behind these, but I just cycle through and figure out which one kind of looks the coolest. So these are all looking pretty cool. They just add a ton of neat effect to your photo. But I think I'm going to stick with soft light, and then I'm going to drop that down in opacity a pretty good bit. Somewhere around 20, 21, something like that. Okay, so it's getting somewhere. The next thing I'm going to do is start adding some color to this, because this feels too drab and too flat. So I'm going to go, first I'm going to add some grain. So I'm going to make a new layer. Shift Command N, we'll call this grain, and I'm going to just make a dark shape layer on top of this. So it doesn't have to be black, but it can be, but something fairly dark. Hit OK, just draw a big square here, and that looks good. And we can rasterize this, right click and do rasterize layer, and then I can go to filter and noise and add noise, and that looks fine with me. You can do a few different options here as far as the style goes. You can take out the color there, make it monochromatic, or add a little bit of color, and hit OK. And now we can do some blending modes on that. Again, I'm just flipping through to see what really fits well. So I think exclusion works pretty well. I'm going to drop that opacity down a good bit. So we got a little noise in there. And then I'm going to add a selective color adjustment layer, and this is sort of going to be a global adjustment layer to the entire thing. So I'm going to click on this little one with the triangles, just a selective color. I use this literally all the time for most every project, and I really started just mainly adjusting these whites, neutrals, and blacks here. So I'm going to go into the blacks, and you can start pulling these left and right to get some nice looking color to your image. So I'm going to go somewhere in this general vicinity. I won't get it just right, but we'll get close. So just mess with them, and if it feels like it's getting far away from where you want your project to be, then just leave it alone. But sometimes it can add a really nice touch. I think I could even maybe go dark on my background here a little bit more. Sometimes you can even take these selective colors and duplicate them, and maybe even do just some additional adjustments. I'm going to reset that, and then just see what happens when I just start playing around with some of the other settings here. So they're sort of compounding on top of each other, and it can turn out to be sort of cool sometimes. Okay, so we'll just leave that for now, and we'll move on. So now I'm going to take my entire orb here. I'm going to group that together. We'll just call this orb. And I'm going to duplicate that as well and just move it down here to the bottom and turn it off, just again so I have those layers if I need to reference them again, because I do have layer mask on these, and these will begin to pixelate if I don't if I start scaling up and down, and it'll start falling apart. So but we'll go with this for now, and I'm going to hit Command T for that entire folder, and then click the corner, hold down the Option key so it scales from the middle, and we'll stick this somewhere here. Slide this down in the middle here. Let's go right there. Hit enter to lock that in. And now once I get to this point, I'm starting to feel like, okay, now I have something, and I can just start tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and making it just right. So now I'm going to try to make this glow just a little bit. So I'm going to make a new layer, Shift Command in, and we'll call this glow. And now I'm going to hit my brush tool, and I want to pick something in this vicinity. So I'm going to hit I on the keyboard for my eyedropper tool just to get a close idea of where this is. Go to my color, and now I can sort of find some colors in there. So I might want to grab some more like deeper reds. Hit OK. Hit B on the keyboard, and the first thing I'm going to do is just going to click, make sure my hardness is all the way down, and I'm going to click here in the middle of the circle. That looks pretty good. And now I want to do some blending modes on that. So I'm going to hit Shift plus and minus and just cycle through those and see what kind of happens here. And man, you can see it really adds a ton to that image. This blending with that grain in the background is also again affected by these different selective color options here, and it's making a really cool effect. All right, so that feels pretty good. So I'm going to make another one. Shift Command in for another layer. Hit B on the keyboard. Bump my brush size down a good bit, and maybe we will, let's go even deeper, a deeper color than that. And this is all trial and error. A lot of times I'll do this over and over again to get it just right. So that's probably a little bit too big. So I'm sort of gonna just draw maybe some down here, and it could be a total disaster, but let's try that. Sometimes I'll get something sort of neat. Sometimes I have to go through these blending modes a few times to really decide on which one I want here. So I like that kind of sort of adding some magenta in there. So that feels pretty cool. I could even maybe scale this down some. And what you could also do is go to your filters and maybe add some more blur to that. Let's do like a Gaussian blur maybe. I don't think you can see it. Oh, there it goes. So maybe blur that a whole lot there and hit OK. You can maybe even stretch that out a little bit. So there we go. That's feeling pretty good. And let's just do one more. Let's do Shift Command in, and maybe we will do B. Maybe we'll make this more of a brighter yellow, sort of that center piece there. Let's go even slightly lighter, and hit B on the keyboard for that brush tool. Bump up the size some. We're going to try to bring out some more brightness here in the middle. Let's go a little bit bigger. Something like that. Let's see what that does. And go through those blending modes, Shift plus and minus on the keyboard. See what happens here. That's feeling a bit too yellow, but this is about where I want to play, somewhere in here. So we'll go with that one. Maybe scale it down just a little bit. Let's see if I duplicate it. Hit Enter, Command J to duplicate. Get a little more interest in there. And you may want to like maybe move it out here a little bit to make that a little less uniform around the sides. It's totally up to you. Okay, let's just keep this. So this looks pretty cool. Let's maybe go to the orb, and what if I were to take this layer, all these extra streaks, and duplicate that again. Maybe we can stretch that out even farther. Bring it up some. Stretch it out even farther. And now I can go in and erase pretty much all of this. So I'm going to click on that clipping mask, hit B on the keyboard, make sure black is selected, and then start painting all this out here. But that feels about right. I'm going to scale that down just a little bit more, the entire thing. Now we have our main circle. But I'm also going to, let me actually undo that. I want to put all my glows and stuff inside this folder as well. And now I can sort of scale this down together. So the next thing I had is some lines up here sort of coming up from the top and the bottom. And so I think I just used a dark layer. Let's see, let's make a new layer, Shift Command N for new layer. Drag maybe my shape layer of black. Just make a big square here. So now I can go into that orb and maybe find that clipping mask I used, maybe this one here, and hold down Option, click and drag it up to that rectangle. Here we go. So now we're getting some color in there. I'm going to move that up. Oops. Make sure that layer mask is locked. Move this up some. Probably pretty tall. I think I could even squish this down a good bit here. Somewhere around there. I think what I did is I kept messing around with it and couldn't find anything I really wanted. You can do some different colors, I guess, here. That works. I ended up adding an outer glow to it for some reason. That worked okay, but this will work fine here. Okay, that works pretty well. We'll just go with that. Command J to duplicate that, and then I hit Command T, and I can rotate that, taking my cursor right outside that transform box, and can move that around just like that. All right, I'm going to darken it up a little bit. Click on my rectangle and go even darker. There we go. Hit OK. It's feeling good. It's feeling just about right. Then I believe I added just some grainy, grungy texture to the top of this. So this is the sort of the speckled texture I found here. I believe this maybe came from Spooner Graphics or somebody, but they released some free packs, and so I used this to texturize this image here. So I'm going to pull that down here below the noise, and then I'm going to go through a few blending modes to see what works best for this. Around here, exclusion or screen maybe, and then just drop that opacity way down to get some of that texture in there. Man, that adds a ton. Okay, another thing, maybe we could duplicate that again. I saw some cool ones in there that I thought were sort of interesting. Let's Shift plus through that. Oops, hit Enter. Let me turn this one off so I can see what I'm doing here. That's pretty cool looking right there. It's got these kind of like pieces are coming off of it. I'll turn this one back on. So now we're sort of getting some more colors in there as well, which is pretty cool. So you can maybe move that around some, get some different effects, maybe bump that up some. There we go. It's cool. I like that. Command T, maybe we could scale that down some. You could even take this layer and maybe to give it a little bit of a movement, you could go to Filter and Blur and Motion Blur. And let's see. I don't want to do a ton, maybe just a little bit. Pretty much the final step was just to add my text, and I just kept it pretty simple. Command T, or sorry, not Command T, but just T. I drew a text box here. Kept my text pretty white, just slightly off-white probably. Hit OK, and this is a let's see, Termina black, pretty thick font there. Pull this down some, and just that scale even more. Something like that. And then I could take maybe that paper texture I had earlier. I'm gonna click on levels, click on the paper, hold down Option, click and drag that up. So I'm basically gonna make a new sort of speckled, dirty texture. And so I'm gonna combine all these layers, but first I want to take my paper and bump up that opacity back to 100, just like it is normal. So this looks good here. I'm probably gonna take this levels and really crunch it down so I get some dirty texture in there. And so now I can click on levels, hold down Shift and Command E to kind of turn this into one textured layer. can right click on the levels that I just made here and do create clipping mask. And so now it's going to be on top of our texture, be top of our text layer there. So it's kind of just being cut out of the main text. So now I can click and move this around because that's a bit too grainy for me. Maybe I can move it around to try to find a lighter spot, or I can then add a levels to that. Let's see. Make sure that is a clipping mask on that as well. And try to pull some of that stuff out of there. Okay, so that's looking pretty nice. Now the color of our text I don't believe is going to be affected unless I maybe do some blending modes on that layer. So now we can get some of that, yeah, maybe make it just a tad bit more dirty. There we go. Probably could turn that down just a bit. Okay, that's good. So I would want to keep all this together, so I'm going to make sure my text is selected, group that together. This is my text. And I'm just going to add a new text layer for that last little bit. Command or just T on the keyboard. And a lot of worship experience. We'll make this one same font maybe, but then scale it way down. I don't think that's what I did, but for now this will work. And I could use this color maybe in this blue here to get that to pop some. Okay, probably a little smaller there. So I think that about covers it. I would probably spend another 30 minutes playing around with these different layers and seeing what would happen if I were to add maybe some odd colors in here. Anyways, feel free to play around with it. I hope this was helpful. This was super fun to make. I'm sad it didn't get chosen, but I really liked the design and thought I would share it a little bit. So enjoy, and thanks for watching. Take care. Bye.